Hello, I'm Susan Cadeau. Thank you for being with us. Following the massacre of 17 people at a high school in Parkland, Florida, there has been much discussion about gun control, background checks, and mental health. The shooter was a troubled teen who had a long history of behavioral problems at home and at school. This week at a forum in Tulsa, educators and mental health professionals discussed childhood trauma and how it affects students.
Children are expected to behave and learn when they enter school, but many students have trouble concentrating and coping because they have chaotic home lives, are experiencing trauma, or have been traumatized. Tracy Storick is an emotional disability specialist with Tulsa Public Schools.
We have approximately 1 in 4 of our children in public school that have had some type of a trauma. And that is a very large number. So that is every 4th kid that is walking through your door in the morning has some type of trauma.
A captive audience at Tulsa's Education Service Center heard from professionals about what trauma is and what it does to children. Richard Desiri is a managing partner at an outpatient behavioral health agency.
Children who have been verbally abused and threatened, whether it's physical abuse or threat of assault, sexual abuse, being around caregivers where they don't feel like there's anyone that loves them or cares about them.
Melody Adams is a licensed professional counselor.
The trauma they have lived through, and in many cases are still experiencing, has impacted some of them from the time they were born because of substance abuse issues. It often causes things like ADHD, PTSD, oppositional defiant disorders, depression, anxiety disorders.
Kids that have post-traumatic stress disorder are going to re-experience that. They're going to have intrusive thoughts. They're going to have memories that are intrusive. They're going to go to extraordinary measures to avoid anything that reminds them of that trauma.
Almost 9,600 Oklahoma children are in the custody of the state because they have been traumatized at home and may still be experiencing trauma because they're in the foster care system.
Many of our kids have abandonment issues. We are getting a large number of children who are in the foster care system, who are at the Laura Dester Children's Center, who have seen in excess of 10 to 15 home placements, and they are still in elementary school.
Statistics cited at the meeting included these. Students traumatized by violence will have lower grade point averages, negative remarks on their records, higher absentee rates, and may engage in reckless or aggressive behaviors. Desiri says 1/3 of children with the most exposure to trauma will have chronic depression their whole lives.
Children that have 4 or more trauma experiences are 10 times as more likely to have a suicide attempt. They're 7 times as more likely to inject drugs, or 5 times as more likely to be alcoholic. They're far more likely to get raped. They're far more likely to be in prison. Children that have trauma are on a trajectory because the trauma has affected their brain.
Nicole Murray teaches children who have been identified as emotionally disabled.
Every morning we do a morning meeting. We do a check-in. What happened last night? Did you eat? Was mom at home? Was there anything going on with the parents? Was there noise? Was, the lights off? Was there heat? Did anything happen on the way to school, on the bus, in the hallway, in the restroom? What was your trigger?
But not all teachers have received the training Murray has. Speakers emphasize that there is a need for a trauma-informed environment at all schools.
All of us as educators must remember that these children's safety is much more important to them than learning. They come into the class in a hyper-arousal, being fearful of what will happen, and usually they've failed many times from where they've come.
A school is a sanctuary, and it can be that. For these kids, it can be the one place where people have a relationship with them, where people don't just talk to them and tell them, people don't yell at them, people don't threaten them, but people listen to them. And if they're distressed, people lead them to a place where they can gather themselves.
They have betrayal of trust if they even trust anyone. So as someone who has been a teacher in the classroom, building that trust has got to be first and foremost. In the state of Oklahoma, I have to get on my soapbox. You can ask teachers to do that when you continually berate them. They're seeking out and dealing with 20 or 30 or 40 kids in a classroom. To build that trust is exceptionally difficult.
Educators say they know of many ways to address the myriad of emotional issues children are suffering, but without proper state funding, their hands are tied.